man practiced swordsmanship every day, swinging his sword thousands of times without eating or drinking. For 30 years, regardless of rain or shine, he never slacked off. The villagers who had grown up listening to the sound of his sword training had now become respected village elders. Yet he continued to swing his sword without stopping. But on a day 7 years later, the sound of his sword practice suddenly stopped. The village chief, accustomed to the sound, rushed to his home. He found the man already dead, his eyes still wide open, unwilling to release his sword. The village chief gently closed his eyes, ending his life as a sword fanatic. At that moment, a young boy suddenly opened his eyes wide. It turned out that the life of the sword fanatic had only been a dream. The feeling was incredibly real. Even the sensation of muscle strain felt so vivid. The boy could no longer fall asleep. He longed desperately for the feeling of wielding a sword. He immediately went to the training ground, picked up a massive sword and began to train. The once noisy training ground suddenly became silent. It turned out the boy was the eldest son of the Lord. Since his mother's death, he had done nothing. For the past 10 years he had never left his bed. People even called him the useless young master. No one could believe he would practice swordsmanship. Some people even started to mock. How could such a useless person possibly wield a sword well? It must be because he was humiliated in public by the neighboring young lord. He's just pretending out of anger. Even the 2 knights who were most generous thought he wouldn't last 3 days. But the boy didn't care about their gossip at all. He struggled to swing the heavy sword in his hands. It felt as though he was the sword god from his dream. Although the process was painful, every time he swung the sword he felt incredibly at ease. As the sword fell again, the butler rushed over and caught him. The boy then realized that without realizing it, it had already gotten dark. Back in bed, he swore never to practice swordsmanship again, because the fatigue felt disgusting to him. But for the next 3 days he kept showing up at the training ground. Ever since that dream, he had been dreaming of the sword god every night. To dispel that strange feeling, he could only keep swinging the sword. Even the knights who said he wouldn't last 3 days began to see him in a new light. However, a passing wandering knight didn't think much of it. His strength couldn't support the weight of the sword, let alone train with the intention of seeking revenge for his humiliation. The real problem was using such intentions to approach swordsmanship. At that moment, a lion heron suddenly appeared in the sky, carried a girl and landed in front of the crowd. The newcomer was the boy's half-sister, Cyril, a gifted magician since childhood. First she scolded the knights for their idle gossip. Then she angrily told the boy to stop training with the sword. "You who always just slept. You think endlessly swinging the sword will change anything?" But no matter how much Cyril complained, the boy remained unaffected. His focus was entirely on the sword in his hands. This caught the attention of the wandering knight. He decided to stay and observe the boy for a few more days. Late at night, the butler noticed Cyril sneaking around. He warned her that the young master was resting. If she had something to say, she could return another day. Upon hearing this, Cyril exploded with anger. "Are you disobeying me? You must not tell anyone about this." When the boy woke up from his dream, he found a letter from his sister. "I apologize for what I said this morning. I heard you've been overworking yourself with sword training. That's why I was worried. This doll should help with your sleep. I hope it helps." The boy couldn't help but feel touched. Even though he had been a failure for 10 years, his family had never given up on him. From then on, the boy trained even harder. For 10 straight days he appeared at the training ground. Everyone began to look at him with new respect. Even the wandering knight grew curious about him. He had initially thought the boy was training out of wounded pride. But it was clear that was not the case. The boy had an ironclad will. If he could unleash his full potential, he would become a peak figure on the continent. The old man grew more and more pleased with the boy. He decided to recommend an excellent swordsmanship teacher for him. But after inquiring, he learned the Lord had already found a knight named Oren to teach him. The old man immediately shouted in protest, "That drunken good-for-nothing? He'll only ruin the boy's talent." The old man quickly found the Lord. He handed over a recommendation letter from the Kruno Swordsmanship Academy. This was the strongest swordsmanship academy on the continent. Only those with exceptional talent were qualified to enter. The Lord knew this very well. But he also knew how fierce the competition inside was. It wouldn't be easy to persist. So he left the choice to the boy. "Whether you go or not, your father will respect your decision." The boy, unwilling to continue sinking, decided to go. He was determined to change himself. The next day the boy bid farewell to his parents. He arrived at the Kruno Swordsmanship Academy, known as the strongest on the continent. He presented a recommendation letter from the wandering knight Bran. He learned from the instructor's words. What puzzled the instructor was, how could that sharp-eyed old man have chosen this useless young master? The boy pushed open the door of the Swordsmanship Academy. He immediately became the center of attention. Their gazes were filled with contempt. It seemed they were surprised by his arrival. Some even started mocking him. Fortunately, the instructor appeared on stage at this moment, interrupting their gossip. From now on, you are all probationary students here. If you can last a year here, and pass 2 grueling tests, you will become official disciples of the academy. But before that, let me introduce a place to you. This will be the site for your physical training. With that, the instructor swiftly charged forward. Everyone move. This sudden move caught everyone off guard. They all started swinging their arms and legs to catch up. The boy, exhausted, collapsed to the ground after a short while. At that moment, his whole body ached unbearably. One more step and his heart might give out. But then a figure suddenly appeared in his mind. Yes, compared to that man, what is this little pain? I want to become someone on his level. The boy got up again. He desperately swung his arms and legs, until his body was drenched in sweat, until he had no strength left to run. The assistant instructor noticed something was off. Just before he collapsed, the assistant saved him. This guy's body is completely at its limit. He's only pushing through with his willpower. What a remarkable guy. When the boy opened his eyes again, he found himself in the infirmary of the Swordsmanship Academy. The instructor placed a list in front of him. This is just a small test to evaluate your physical abilities. It won't affect the final test results. The boy opened the list. To his surprise, he was at the very bottom. The instructor wanted to comfort him, but noticed that he showed no reaction at all. He really is a strange guy. Soon after, the instructor arranged the daily schedule for the students. All training areas will be open for use. Students can train at any time, but there is one condition. All students are prohibited from using weapons. This made the boy feel troubled. How can he practice swordplay like this? Soon evening arrived. Brett entered the training room with 2 lackeys. While his lackeys admired the grandeur of the place, Brett was distracted by a young girl. It was Ilya, the swordsmanship family's genius. She's even stronger than the rumors said. Just seeing her was enough to feel her overwhelming pressure. Brett, usually so proud, instantly understood the gap between them. Is she really just a probationary student? At this moment, Brett's lackeys noticed the boy training alone in the corner. As expected of the useless young master, he's about to faint just lifting a dummy stick. But what no one expected was, genius Ilya actually walked over to the useless young master. She whispered something to him. Then she casually left the room. This moment stunned everyone present. Everyone was curious about what Ilya had said, but when the boy looked at them, they quickly turned their heads and pretended to be training. Driven by curiosity, the red-haired girl couldn't resist. She dropped her equipment and quickly walked up to the boy. What did Ilya say to you? Are you two in a relationship? But what Judith didn't expect was that Ilya only told the boy how to properly use the equipment. Judith left disappointed. The boy was about to continue his training, when Brett suddenly appeared next to him. What did Ilya say to you? And tell me what that redhead said too. After that, the boy received guidance from Ilya every day. His physical abilities gradually improved through training, but no one still believed in him. They were convinced that a useless young master, no matter how hard he tried, could never turn things around. 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. Out of the original 400 probationary students, only less than half remained. And today, the instructor announced the upcoming midterm exam. As long as the obstacle course is completed within the time limit, they will pass. The top 5 students will receive a reward from the academy owner. The exam will take place in 10 days at 9 a.m. During this period, training will be self-arranged. Afterward, everyone trained even harder. And the boy was no exception. He was no longer the useless young master. Now he often pushed himself to the limit. Even Judith couldn't help but glance at him. How did he manage to work so hard? Could my willpower be weaker than his? Thinking this, she resumed her training. When it came to effort, she didn't want to be surpassed. After training, the boy collapsed onto his bed. He noticed something unusual recently. The students who once looked down on him were now beginning to see him as a competitor. But more than that, he was curious about Ilya. Why was she willing to help him unconditionally? The day of the midterm exam soon arrived. Everyone watched as the boy, drenched in sweat, whispered among themselves. Did he train all night? What a foolish guy. Brett shot a glance at Judith. This guy has always overtrained in the past. Anyone could tell his condition was terrible. Looks like he'll stay in second place. At this point, the instructor began explaining the rules. The entire exam was divided into 4 stages. Strength lifting, jumping box, long distance running and swimming. As long as the student meets the goal, they can advance to the next stage. With the instructor's signal, the competition began. Everyone rushed to lift the barbells as quickly as possible. The boy, once looked down on by everyone, was now rapidly pushing the barbell in his hands. Is he crazy? If he keeps this up, he'll collapse. At the same time, Ilya easily finished the lift. She quickly moved on to the second event. Before long, the boy also completed the lift. This scene immediately stunned everyone present. But what shocked them even more came next. The boy then directly moved on to the jumping box stage. He completed the jump at an almost frenzied pace. At this point the few still lifting barbells were no longer calm. Especially Judith, who was already exhausting her body. At this moment the boy had reached the long-distance running stage. He closely followed behind Ilya. At this moment he felt incredibly light. A surge of passion rose in his heart. He had the urge to surpass Ilya. But just then, Judith overtook them both and reached the front. She had worked so hard to get to this position. She didn't want to lose to anyone. Because of her commoner background, Judith had endured much ridicule from others. That's why she trained harder than anyone else. She had finally made it to the top sword academy of the continent. To prove that she was no worse than anyone else. At this moment Judith dove into the water. She swam forward with astonishing speed. But suddenly she felt a sharp pain in her thigh. Now she could no longer move forward. She could only watch helplessly as Ilya overtook her. Tears slowly slid from the corner of her eyes. Even if I push myself I still can't beat you? Suddenly a wave of exhaustion flooded her mind. Judith slowly sank into the water. Maybe it's time to rest. But when she opened her eyes again, she found a boy was helping her move forward with difficulty. She was unwilling. Why is it you saving me? The boy didn't respond. He soon succeeded in bringing her back to the starting point. But just then, the students who had been behind all caught up. But the boy didn't care. He insisted on waiting until the instructor arrived before continuing the test. Because of this, the boy who had been ranked second fell to second to last place. But he still managed to complete the test. He wasn't eliminated. However, some people in the crowd started mocking him. Why did he do such unnecessary things during the exam? I don't know what he's pretending to be kind. But it's precisely because he successfully made it into the top 5. That Brett, who was ranked second, was left deep in thought as he watched the boy. His performance in the test far exceeded mine. If Judith hadn't overexerted herself, she would have ranked 4th. I have to admit I lost this time. The next day while the boy was training alone, Ilya found him and confronted him. Why did you do that during the competition? The boy was stunned by the question. I just felt like I should do it. But his answer angered Ilya. Even if you didn't, the instructors would have saved her. You gave up the reward of becoming the leader of the first academy on such a small thing. Are you really crazy? Next we'll begin training with swords. This is completely different from training the body. Swordsmanship cannot just grow through hard work. It also requires talent. Because of your judgment yesterday, you may have completely lost the chance to be taught swordsmanship by the academy master. I won't help you again. Soon it was time to announce the results of the test. The top 5 outstanding preparatory students would have the opportunity to meet with the academy master and receive rewards. But at this moment the academy master said that there was one student missing. Please, student number 311, come up to receive your reward. The announcement caused an uproar in the crowd. The academy master slowly said, people may experience incredible growth and achievements while chasing after others, but in the process they might miss out on the most important things. But this preparatory student is different. At a critical moment he chose to sacrifice himself to save a classmate who fell into the water. I believe his actions were valuable. Soon it was time for the students to meet with the academy master. Brett chose to receive guidance from the academy master. Ilya, however, was different. She actually requested to spar with the academy master and receive guidance. The academy master frowned slightly. This is a bit difficult. I can only give you one piece of advice. Don't let others control you. Pursue your own life. Don't obsess over this and waste your time. Go back to your family and learn your swordsmanship. That's your path. But Ilya was determined. The academy master had no choice but to agree to her request. Soon the academy master completed the rewards for the others. Next there's still one last person. But when facing the academy master's reward, he only asked one question. That is, how can he make up with a girl? The academy master became even more curious about the boy. After all, everyone on the continent wants his guidance. After resolving the boy's confusion, the academy master made an exception and gave him a chance to be taught swordsmanship. But the boy's understanding of swordsmanship was limited to swinging the sword. He didn't even know what to ask. It seemed like the academy master saw his uncertainty. The academy master decided to hold on to this opportunity. If you encounter any questions about swordsmanship in the future, you can come and ask me anytime. The academy master watched the boy's retreating figure, lost in thought. He clearly couldn't understand swordsmanship. Yet he had a clear goal in mind. It was as though there was someone guiding him from behind. Soon the boy began his training. The usually indifferent Judith walked over. She first thanked the boy for saving her life, and then generously offered to be his friend. Under Judith's pressure, the boy had no chance to refuse. But this seemed fine to him. Everyone chose their preferred wooden swords. But the boy walked straight to the corner. He picked up the unclaimed broadsword. This immediately attracted everyone's attention. A mere beginner wants to use a broadsword? He's really dumb. But But the next moment shock covered their faces. The boy suddenly swung the broadsword. The fierce momentum instantly kicked up a cloud of dust. Even the instructors couldn't help but glance at him. Though his movements were a bit stiff, he still had such a powerful presence. Suddenly Brett stepped out of the crowd. He pointed his sword at the boy. "I invite you to spar with me." The moment these words were spoken, the crowd erupted. This was strictly prohibited in the academy, and they had never even learned any swordsmanship classes. Just as the instructors were about to stop them, the academy master allowed their sparring. It's nice to have something different occasionally. With the academy master's approval, Brett's figure shot out like a swift rabbit. In an instant he was right next to the boy. The boy swung his sword to defend. The barrage of attacks came again. The fierce offensive left the boy no chance to retaliate. Everyone thought the outcome was already decided. But Judith noticed something. This guy is testing him. At this moment Brett retreated quickly. After the brief exchange he saw the boy's shortcomings. This guy's reactions are indeed fast, but his movements are very irrational. He doesn't seem like someone who practices swordsmanship. "Let me test your strength then." Brett deliberately left an opening. The boy seized the moment. He swung his sword down with earth-shattering force. This immediately startled Brett. His body instinctively flashed backward. He knocked the broadsword out of the boy's hands. Sparring over, Brett claimed the final victory. The instructor then began announcing the results of the swordsmanship test, and based on their abilities he would assign the students to groups. First, the highest level Group A members. They would face even harsher training. Then came Groups B and C, where the training would be relatively lighter. But when all the groups had been assigned, the boy's name wasn't called. Just as Judith was puzzled, the instructor revealed the answer. It turned out that since the boy knew nothing about swordsmanship, he was placed in the special Group F. The next day, the swordsmanship training officially began. The doctor became the boy's temporary instructor. The naive boy thought that with enough effort he could catch up to the others. The instructor didn't immediately refute him. Instead he showed him through action. Effort is important, but it's nothing compared to natural talent. If you can master basic swordsmanship in a week, I can promote you to Group C. But if you can't even manage that, then I suggest you give up. But what surprised the instructor was that the boy had grasped most of the swordsmanship principles in just a few days. His progress was becoming faster and faster. Although his effort played a part, it was undeniable. This guy indeed had incredible talent. The time came for the test heave. The boy asked Judith to help him check his swordsmanship. As the boy swung his sword, a look of shock appeared on Judith's face. She, who was very strict with sword practice, actually gave a thumbs up to the once helpless young master. The next day, the instructor returned to the infirmary. This confirmed that the boy had successfully advanced to Group C. But that was still not enough. To help him advance to Group A, Judith decided to personally spar with him. Reluctantly the boy agreed. Battle was about to begin. Judith launched the first attack. Even while wielding a heavy sword she was still as agile as a rabbit. The boy barely blocked the strike. Using the advantage of the great sword he repelled Judith. He leapt and swung vertically downward. But as he landed he quickly changed posture, which threw Judith off balance. However, she reacted quickly. Twisting the sword's hilt she sent the boy flying. The spar ended with Judith's victory. But she suddenly changed the topic. "I heard you've had trouble with Ilya lately. She should be alone at the small training grounds by now." With that Judith turned and left, leaving the boy deep in thought. Meanwhile, Ilya was practicing her family's swordsmanship alone. Suddenly the appearance of a figure interrupted her. It was the boy who had just sparred with Judith. He awkwardly greeted Ilya, then he took out a letter and a pouch. Ilya found his actions a bit puzzling. But the boy explained, "My sister is not very good at interacting with others. So we often fight, but every time I wake up, I find gifts and letters she left behind. I'm not good with words either. So I tried writing down my thoughts." Ilya remained cold-faced. "Even so, I won't help you any further." The boy said it was fine.